What's up, Backgammon fans? I'm Marc Olsen from BackgammonGalaxy.com. In today's episode of the Backgammon Galaxy podcast, we have a special guest. He's a very famous backgammon player, especially in the community. He's been a grandmaster for several years. He's been on the Giants of Backgammon list since I think actually since the list came around almost. He's one of the most consistent players on the Giants of Backgammon. He's written several books, both on backgammon. And another thing that's interesting about Bob is that he has a PhD in philosophy. So he has a lot of thoughts about the game, about gambling, and one of the main topics I want to discuss with Bob today is the morality around gaming and gambling. So also I want to talk to him about other things about the game. So let's get into it. Bob Wachtel, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Nice to be here.
Good to see you. Okay, Bob. So you've done a lot of thinking about this topic of today, gambling morality, and you kind of have I wouldn't say unorthodox stance because we are in the gambling community. So I don't think that you are a contrarian per se, but maybe from societal norms, you might be a little bit of a contrarian. And I think you have some really interesting perspectives. So these are some of the things that I would like to have a discussion with you today, and hopefully the viewers can enjoy it too. So if you have to summarize or maybe just outline your thoughts about gambling.
Yeah, well, I think gambling is an activity that's gotten what we call in the U.S. a bad rap. And if you're not familiar with that expression, in the police department, they have for each criminal, there's what's called a rap sheet, which is all the bad things that person has done in their life. And gambling, mainly at the behest of religion, has been given a bad rap by society. And by that, I mean that it's only its downside that's been examined by most everyone. And this goes back to the kind of approach to life that the early Americans, the Puritans, took, because they felt that things could only go wrong and never go right. So they were afraid of anything that gave people pleasure, because that could detract from doing your work and from prayer and from pleasing God.
Mm-hmm.
And gambling had especially low place in their esteem because it seemed to offer an alternative to the Protestant work ethic.
Mm-hmm. This thing about getting something without really doing any productive labor.
Right, exactly. And this is that's a lot worse than other pleasures because it undermines the basic principle of the Protestant ethic. It's actually contrary to the Protestant ethic. And so gambling became a negative entity that had to be prohibited, and even if people ended up wanting to gamble, it had to be closely regulated and controlled, and there had to be a lot of stigma attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And all that is an important thing to do if there were no upside to gambling, if it had no benefits. However, it has, in my estimation, quite considerable benefits. And I actually believe that society would be much better off if it took a more enlightened attitude.
Mm-hmm.
If it actually, because its attitude toward gambling has always been quite dysfunctional. It's basically been the way things stand now. The attitude society's taken is basically to discourage gambling, to stigmatize it, to not educate people about it. And then when they finally reach maturity, or at the age of 21, to allow them to gamble, but they can only do that in a casino where they cannot win.
Mm-hmm.
And since winning is the great prize that gambling dangles before us, and it's the logical end of doing things right, the person who follows society's dictates ends up being oppressed, actually being taken advantage of. They lose their money, and they never get the pleasure that is the logical end of gambling, which is winning.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually twofold, right? Because you haven't been trained, so to say, to deal with the nature. So you're kind of like, even though you're now an adult, you are still not mature enough to realize that you are at a disadvantage and you're gonna lose. And furthermore, you've actually also had a freedom loss because government has been putting a limitation on your freedom, that you haven't been able, for instance, to have a free market of gambling, and some types of bets have been illegalized and so forth.
Yes, well, I wouldn't say it's a lack of maturity, but I would say it's a lack of education. I believe that
that's what I meant.
People should learn that they should actually be taught to gamble and get a lot of experience at a very young age.
Uh-huh.
Even kids who are like, under the age of 10 should be, making little bets with each other and tossing coins or whatever, or doing flips or whatever, holding their breath for a minute or something like that for a few pennies. And this is like almost invaluable education. And part of the reason is that we live in a capitalist society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a capitalist society is one that maximizes competition among its citizens. What that means is that as an adult, you're going to be asked to make thousands of important decisions every day, which have the character of bets. They're profit-loss judgments that you have to make, where you have to incorporate probability estimates,
risk-reward
and
calculations,
and dangers, and it's like the author Malcolm Gladwell, who he's emphasized that to be expert in any field, you need about 10,000 hours of experience. And so to be expert in the skill that capitalist society requires of you, which is to make these judgments all the time, what should you wear a mask during the pandemic? Should you who should you marry, and should you marry, and what kind of medicine should you?
Should I start a business? Should I study law? Should I study to become a teacher?
All these things, yeah, right.
Anything.
And without some practice in thinking that way, you're not really able to judge things very well.
Yeah. Just to go back to the thing you said about even just teaching kids, or just maybe it's more like just allowing kids, because I think what kids actually do in the absence of parents, they do make bets all the time. They do compete. They throw the little marble balls, or they, play cards, and it's almost like an innate thing in our psychology that we compete about these things. So it's like a restriction, that it's a social restriction from society or parents or something like this, that tells you that no, you can't compete in that way because of the stigma or whatever. And this thing about the capitalist society, that in a capitalist society we do compete all the time, but I think actually it goes a little bit deeper than that, that competition is innate in humans. And if we don't have a capitalist society, we might look at other societies like the Soviet Union. We had a collectivist society, a communist society. They also had competition. They just had competition in other areas. They had political competition, or they had competition in how to game the system, or how to maximize the amount of food you got, or whatever. So I think this idea of controlling competition among humans is a little bit counter natural to some extent. And I think that capitalism is actually the fairest way, because capitalism is kind of like the state of nature, except that we have a government, or some sort of paternal figure that ensures that you cannot use brute force. Like, it's not the rule of the forceful. It's basically the hierarchies or the competition we get are based on competence, right? That
Yes.
it actually rewards competence rather than some. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you talk about kids, uh, I don't have kids, but you do, and you should be watching
Just
to
that.
see how they develop, because I think there's a stage before betting, which is called, I don't know what the Danish word is, but when you dare somebody to do something, that's something that kids do naturally, I think, from a really early age. And betting, gambling involves money to some extent, but kids even pre financially have this sort of desire to test each other and to see what they can do, and to dare each other to do things, so that you know um, and this is kind of one of the kind of bets that later on adults can do, and some of our friends have done, as you know. They're called performance bets, where you bet somebody that they can or can't do something. They can't stop smoking for a month, for example, or they can't lose weight, or things like that. I think these are also really can be very useful kinds of motivations to do things that we really want to do, and
So that would be another hidden upside that we
Yeah.
fail to recognize.
Yep, yep. There are many upsides that we fail to recognize.
Yeah. What else do you got? What more
Well,
upside?
including gambling teaches you finance. You have a certain bankroll, and you need to tailor your bets to your bankroll and not overbet, but you can't underbet either, because if you underbet, you'll go broke because you're not taking advantage of the opportunities.
I like that.
So
I like that a lot.
the other, also financially, within the gambling world, there's credit. When you deal with people and you have a great situation, and you say to somebody, well, here's this great bet you could make, but I don't have the money, you have to loan me the money. Well, if it turns out that you are unethical or wrong, either one, your credit rating will go down among your peers. So you're taught also that kind of financial discipline.
Yeah. Okay, so
And
that's actually two things. Let me just stop you right there, Bob, because let me just go a little bit further with these two things you just said. The first one was this thing about the idea of a bankroll, that you have to maximize your bankroll growth. And I really like that, because life is not a, you can kind of see life as a continuous game. It's not just a one-rounded game. You have to maximize over many sequences. So if you,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, so if you underbet, you don't maximize your opportunity. If you overbet, then you're it's getting too risky. Your risk of ruin goes up, and
Yep.
you can't just burn your bridges in this round. You can't just maximize as if there's no tomorrow, because there is. Life is 100 years. Okay, so that one I really liked. The other one, I didn't fully understood what you meant. Did you mean that this term, that bets and credit, so to say, or credit or money or whatever money is, that it's kind of a way of forming a hierarchy where you can go up or down in the hierarchy, and we use credits as scores. And the reason that this is clever is that we find out how competent you are in being a, you could say, like being a steward of capital if it was a capitalist society, or whether you should not be responsible really for handling this credit. It should go to
Yes,
someone else who
exactly.
can make better use of it.
Yes, you've got it. Just as a credit agency uh, defines your credit
Mm-hmm.
by how well you've paid your debts, and how timely you are, and how responsible you are.
Yeah. So
That,
instead of
that
having parents or a political party, we just compete on a free marketplace, and we see how your score is, and that's kind of more fair, right? Because
right?
you don't have anybody uh, who has that power over you. Like I'm getting scared to see the technological growth of China, actually, because of the the surveillance level of surveillance they have on their citizens. Like they have the apps that surveils them and all that stuff, and then they're using that to as a credit score. I mean, okay, it's actually fair because it's still based on your actions, but it's you sacrifice freedom and privacy. It's a little, yeah. So I think I prefer just the I don't know if we can call it the capitalist way, or I'm also drawing some parallels here. I mean, of course, it's a little bit off topic, but again, it's so connected, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, like freedom. If you have the freedom to bet, I mean, and that's kind of what you're advocating. You should actually train your kids to be a good citizen in the capitalist world. And if you're just being paternalistic and trying to overprotect them, they're kind of not, yeah, ready for how the capitalist world is. And maybe you would be a better citizen of the Soviet Union in the 1960s, where you just
Yeah,
told what to
yeah,
do.
yeah. I don't think very much of what I'm talking about applies to communist societies.
No, yeah.
But one other thing I wanted to mention, one of the other benefits of gambling is that if you have a group of people that you gamble with, you learn very quickly what their character is.
Hmm.
Some people are cheaters. Some people are stiffs. Some
Hmm.
people are, uh, bullshit artists. Some people, but some people are straight shooters, and some people mean what they say and say what they mean, and they pay their debts. And uh, first of all, you learn to recognize these types very quickly when you gamble with them, because gambling with other people uh, puts you in a situation where you're tested all the time, and their character is tested. And you can go right from there. Like you've known somebody in the gambling world, and you've gambled with them, and you know that they are trustworthy, you would go on to uh, make some other investments with them, and uh, you know include them in your circle of people that you're comfortable with.
Hmm.
Whereas these other characters, you discard them. They're good, and you know exactly how far you can take things with them,
Hmm.
know at what point they're going to twist things a little bit. There are some people, for example, when you make a bet with them, when the time comes for them to pay, they find all sorts of excuses where, oh, you didn't mention this. So another thing that gambling teaches you to do, which is very interesting, is it teaches you how to draw up a contract, because a bet really is a contract. And let's say we're betting on a sporting event, and there's some sort of interruption, and person you're betting with says, well, that invalidates it, and we have no bet now. These are all things that when you bet with people, you learn how to make that sort of contract, and it's a sort of a lawyerly kind of skill that you acquire.
Yeah. So, okay. So it's both a psychological skill of dealing with people, realizing when people are trying to take advantage of
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
and the other way, when can you trust people, and it's also like like getting a law degree.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, forming contract, forming what constitutes of a contract.
yeah,
And what is fair as well, I would say, right? Because you kind of get a sense of fairness because you get put in these situations. I know that's one of the funny things about the backgammon tournaments when you travel around. Like, it's amazing how many situations can actually arise. And being a tournament director for a backgammon tournament, you just have to all of a sudden, like usually what they do is they get a panel so they don't have to make the hard decisions themselves, but it's just amazing how many situations that can happen. Like now this guy, he doesn't think this roll applies because the dice fell out of the board and then back in, and the other guy thinks or the clock didn't work in the right way, or there's just an infinite amount of situations. And I think if you are in the circles, so to say, you do get training in all these kind of situations that where you have to figure out, okay, what's actually fair here. If we choose this, then this guy would be in a disadvantageous spot. That's not fair. Maybe it has to be a little bit of like, how do we reset, and how do we make an equity evaluation? Yeah, cool.
yeah. And you come across a lot of shot takers too.
Yes, it's funny,
There's
right?
the story I tell in my backgammon dictionary. Under the term shot taker, I give this example. There was a guy who was a famous cheater in LA who cheated me several times, and he would do this. He would be playing somebody, and let's say he thinks I'm his friend anyway. I try to avoid the guy, but he's playing this guy, and he says, "Hey, Bob, come over." I come over. He says, "Oh, do you do me a favor? Like, I need to make a phone call. I'm playing Jimmy here. Would you just take over for me? I'll be back in half an hour." So I say, okay, and now I play Jimmy. And after it's more than a half hour goes by, maybe 45 minutes or an hour, finally the guy comes back. And he says, "Oh, let's see." And he looks at the score sheet. Now, if I won, he says, "Wow, thanks a lot, Bob. That was great. I really appreciate you taking over for me." But if I lost, he says, "Oh, dear. Oh, you lost. Oh, well, that's too bad. Well, just settle up with me, and then I'll continue with the guy." Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's designed so cleverly,
Uh-huh.
because what did he mean when he said, "Would you take over for me?" It's
Mm-hmm.
completely ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
So, the guy can get away with that many times because there are many people he can pull it on. But
Uh-huh.
eventually, they get a reputation.
Do you think social media and the internet has changed this? Don't you think it's a lot harder to be a hustler these days like this than maybe back when like in the 80s and 90s?
Because why? I mean,
Just because of
only because
Facebook
we're
and social
playing.
media, like you could get your name out there,
Oh,
and people would
oh
know.
yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know about that. I don't know. Like
Mhm.
all con men and sort of small time criminals move around from town to town or whatever. That's the way they do it. But this guy, he got away with stuff for quite a while. I mean, and they do. I mean, eventually, no. But he was. I met. I played in a poker game a couple of years ago, and that guy was had been introduced to the guy running the poker game, and they brought my name up, and the guy was still bragging after 30 years about how he cheated me.
So he actually took like a pride in being clever
Great
enough to
pride.
out trick you.
Oh, great pride. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I guess
I
that
mean,
almost has its own kind of, I mean, ethic. I mean, obviously, I mean, cheating is horrible, but I guess among cheaters, there's still some skill in that as well, right?
well, I know another cheater who says, well, I'm really no good at backgammon, but and I'm a loser, but uh, this is how the skill I do have, and
Is to
I'm
cheat.
really good at it.
So what do we feel about a person like this? Because he's kind of breaking the rules of capitalism and going into to just anarchism, like without a fair rule of law, right?
Well, I mean, that's really like one of the only real problems with gambling is that it seems like you can't. It doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of the courts. If somebody cheats in social gambling anyway, not I'm not talking about cheating a casino, but you and I know somebody and they cheat us, we can't really take it to the government and
Yeah,
ask for compensation.
yeah,
And
but
I actually think that's right. I think it wouldn't really work if we had gambling courts
yeah.
where it was gambling judges. But the thing is that gambling, uh, it's extra legal in that sense. It should be, I think, but it still is a great boot camp for for life.
It is I mean personally I really hate cheaters who try to cheat in trying to make a fair game into an unfair game. I know our late friend Falafel, he really hated cheaters as well, and it's kind of common among elite players that we really hate cheaters. um, but as we just said, like you could have a skill set of a hustler as well. And this guy you just talked about, I think actually there was another story. I think maybe I read it in your book, The Backgammon Chronicles, or I don't remember, or maybe you told it to me about this guy who was cheating a lady with the dice, and he basically cheated her on almost every single roll, and he took
Gabby
great pride of
Horowitz,
it.
yeah,
What was his
yeah,
name?
Gabby Horowitz, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there is an ethics there, but I think maybe is it because they kind of break the or what is this unspoken rule that we have among gamblers that we don't cheat? Why is it so bad?
Well, it's just like a law. It's just like in ordinary society. Um, Cheating is not allowed either. It's called criminal behavior.
Hmm.
So it's going against the rules. The rules of a game or the rules of a bet define the bet. And if somebody cheats, they're violating those rules.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's ordinary criminality.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Another thing that I was thinking about when I was preparing for this conversation yesterday about this thing, I think you kind of briefly touched upon it as well. This thing about using bets to settle if it's competition, or it can also be to settle opinions. Like in a world where we couldn't make a bet on an opinion, that would be a little bit of a weird world, I think, because oftentimes we use bets to actually not just settle opinions, but also put a value or a hierarchy on opinions. That the very act of placing your hard-earned money on an opinion makes it valid somehow. It gives it weight, and you have, and then obviously the next extrapolation of that would be betting markets, where you have multiple agents betting against each other to form a kind of supply and demand for this outcome of this bet, and that's obviously one of the, if not the best prediction model as that we know of. That's betting markets. So
Right.
I mean that's ultra useful. Like betting markets are ultra useful as an economical principle.
Yeah.
So how does that fit into? Because I mean, we do have it, right? Like even on the U.S. presidential election, we had a huge betting market. People were betting right and left, and the prediction on that seemed to be a lot better than all of these prediction experts making predictions on the election, right? So how do we fit betting markets and the act of making a bet to settle an opinion or put a weight on an opinion into this morality?
Well, I think it's the idea of an opinion is absolutely definitive of what a bet is. I mean, if people didn't have opinions, they wouldn't make bets. But that's one of the reasons that betting is so pleasurable, and it's something that most thinkers on the subject have not really considered. It's very pleasant to have opinions.
Yes, yes. But also this hierarchy of opinions, because if we were not able to place a bet or say put your money where your mouth is, all of a sudden your opinion is just as valid as my opinion,
Right.
And I believe in whatever, and you believe in whatever, and but if we can't put our money where our mouth is, I mean, who should we follow in a natural world where it actually matters whether we harvest the field or go pick up some nuts that fell to the ground, right? Real decisions makes a difference in the real world.
Well, one of the chapters of at least a previous version of my book was called "Deflating the Windbags."
What do you mean with this?
You know what a windbag is?
No, is it one to blow air on the fireplace?
No, it's a person who's so full of air that there's no substance to what they say. What we call it a windbag is somebody who just spouts a lot of stupid opinions, and without betting, there's no way to deflate that windbag.
Yeah.
So
I like
betting is a way of putting people who are out of line back in line, putting them in their place.
I like it.
And it has a lot of social justice to it.
Yes.
Especially because there are a lot of people whose knowledge is not directly what's the word, to make something monetizable. They're not software engineers or something like that, but they might know something about sports that somebody else doesn't know, and no one will pay any attention to them or they'll never hear anyone say you're right, because people never do say you're right. But if you bet with the person and then you're right, then they have to pay you. That's like a big compensation for people who are not given their proper recognition.
What I really like about this whole what can you say, like, framework of morality or fairness is that it really is 100% fair, because a lot of things in life or in society, it's not really fair. For instance, I mean, when we go to a societal level, a political level, there are so many weird effects, reinforcement effects, or in a political sphere, there's the effect of the perception of the majority. It doesn't even have to be true, but just the fact that there's a perception of something might affect the system as a whole greatly. But in this morality where we're using our credits or coins or gold pieces or whatever, it's just so fair, you know. That it's. I mean, I think what people get confused about is that you have the element of chance in it. It's not like a game of chess, even though there's also chance in chess. That people just don't really understand that. But uh, when you add the element of chance, people sometimes forget that you still have competence, right? And you can still be better than the other one. But
Yeah.
what is this? What do you think this effect of chance has to do with in people's perception of gambling?
Well, I actually don't think chance is a intrinsic part of gambling,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Okay.
because it's gotten a lot harder now with smartphones. But you used to find a lot of bets just on factual things.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody says the sun is 100,000 miles from the Earth, and somebody else says it's 90,000.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a bet about who's closer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a legitimate bet. It's gambling. They're both gambling because even if one knows and the other doesn't know,
Mm-hmm.
they're still gambling.
Mm-hmm.
That
What about the parallel to the how all the legitimate markets work, or yeah, quote unquote legitimate, like the stock market, the commodity markets, all the currency markets. Essentially, it's the same. Like some bet on one side of the market, the other one bet on the other side of the market. Why is this somehow acceptable? Is it because people are taking a long education and wearing a suit to go to work, and the gambling man, he goes to a basement of someone and makes his bets? What is the difference in it?
There's a great quotation that explains that. It's by a American author of the 19th century. His name was Ambrose Bierce. And if I can get it right, it says, "The gambling that is business looks down its nose at the business that is gambling."
I like it.
So there's no legitimate reason for it at all. No,
Yeah.
it's that just that one has been stigmatized,
Yes.
and it's because of this puritanical fear that it will, prevent people from working.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there is one distinction. That is that if, for instance, in the market of oil or whatever commodity you might say, there is an actual commodity that you're trading. Like someone has, it's a resource that you can use for something. Whereas if you're betting on an outcome of a football match or in a presidential election, nobody gets anything. You know, it's not. We didn't buy anything. We didn't produce anything. It's just the act of the of settling the opinion, so to say.
Well,
Do you
both of
think?
them, they're both zero-sum games, though. The stock market is a zero-sum game, just like gambling markets. Nobody is
Hmm.
producing anything by betting on Microsoft over some other company.
Couldn't you say that obviously backgammon is a
Oh, it
zero-sum game,
allocates
but
capital, though.
exactly that's the thing, right? The stock market main purpose, societal purpose, is to allocate capital efficiently, and to, I mean, to a very high extent, it succeeds. And economics is not a zero-sum game, because the smarter we can allocate capital and the better we can use the comparative advantages and so forth, the more wealth we can actually create. It's not a zero sum game. That could maybe have something to do, but it doesn't change the act of it. right?
Well, that's why I say that gambling is training.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you need to do your whole life. It's
Mm-hmm.
not something you need to be a professional at. It's not something you need to do for high stakes. Um, it's something that you do to learn the way the machine works.
Yeah. I remember my first live poker game where we played for actual stake, like not just peanuts. It was right around the poker boom. I was in my late teens when you had the poker boom back then with Gus Hansen and
Yeah,
all these great poker players with World Poker Tour. I was probably like 17, 18 years old. And then I went to a poker game and I had been playing online a little bit. So I kind of knew the game. And then I all of a sudden I faced a decision whether to call or fold a big bet. And I mean, it was probably something like $100 pot or something like this, which back then for me was a significant amount. My heart was pumping. And then I made a fold. I folded my hand. And I learned so much from that hand because afterwards, as days and weeks and months went past, I realized how ridiculously bad that decision was. He bluffed me, and it was like when I went through the possible hands he could have in his range, it's like, okay, I folded, and it would only make sense if he had that specific hand. Everything else I'm beating. But because I was inexperienced in that situation, I just made such a bad decision. I wasn't I wasn't trained in sitting and making a high stakes decision. And
well, I mean, like high stakes decisions are very difficult, and it's better to avoid them. I mean, you're going to be much more successful if you're not under money pressure when you make decisions.
I mean, I
As
wasn't really under money pressure, right? It was not like a break or get rich moment. It was just the exposure. It was
Yeah,
completely within the range I could afford to win or lose.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
more the fact that I was inexperienced and I was way better. I was a way better player than that decision justified. It was a
yeah.
really, really bad fold. Um, yeah. Okay, Bob. So now we've talked a lot about. I think you made a brilliant case for how to incorporate gambling into a whole person, and to have a person to be ready to face the world in a capitalist world, to take personal responsibility and all that stuff. Embrace it rather than just hide from it. Oh yeah. Oh no no. I found a really cool quote that I just want to round off before we go into the next side of the discussion, which is it's a guy called Jordan Peterson who's really famous on YouTube. Have you heard about this guy?
No, no.
He's I think he's a psychologist, but he became really famous on YouTube for taking the stance against something about free speech. He's pro free speech basically, and he has a lot of other things to say. But he's a psychologist, and he has a quote that I love, and he says that in order to be a strong man, you shouldn't be, or no, something like this. I can't remember exactly. I'm trying to paraphrase here. It, a harmless man is not a strong man. Even though you might be nice to everybody and stuff like this, you have to have the capability of doing a little bit of disruption, or with the shit. If the shit hits the fan, then you have to be strong enough to actually do some damage, and that can be interpreted in many ways. Not talking about physically, but be competent basically,
Yeah,
um, and not necessarily utilize it, but you have to have it within you. So a harmless man is a weak man. A strong man is someone who has the capabilities but chooses not necessarily to indulge in it. I think this applies here as well, right? Because the idea of just hiding from gambling, something that's so you can't do. I mean, you're gonna get exposed to gambling, you're gonna get exposed to drinking, you're gonna get exposed to drugs, all these things. Rather than hiding from it, it's better to face it and build a character around it, have it
yeah,
innate in you, and then control it, right?
yeah. Well, but gambling actually does. Uh,
It
I
builds
mean,
the character.
yeah, drinking doesn't build character, but gambling actually does. I mean,
Yeah.
not everyone can learn from their experience, by the way. So, I mean, I'm painting a more rosy picture than really exists. I mean, there are going to be people who refuse to learn from their experience, and gambling, they can gamble uh, and have thousands of hours of experience and do the same stupid things over and over again.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Okay,
but
so that's
for
a good segue into our next part. So let's talk a little bit about the negatives about gambling. And I know, I mean, we basically, I agree with you totally, and I love all the arguments that you put forward. But let me try to pretend to be devil's advocate here, and try to talk a little about the negatives about gambling. So how would you, if you had to talk the other side's argument, what would you put out and put out as negatives?
well, the negatives are that there are a few people who are going to become addicted, and a few people who are going to blow themselves up by uh, just betting too much and get in a lot of trouble. Uh, um, and I guess there are a few people who really will think that this is an alternative to work.
Mm-hmm.
That oh, this is. I mean, it takes, you have to be uh, not very observant, because like in the gambling world, you see that the people who work are the ones who win.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, and what I really advocate is social gambling, and not high stakes social gambling either. I think that gambling should not, it's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily involve casinos. Definitely doesn't necessarily involve casinos, and should not, unless you have certain specific desires. And it should be something that you learn to do on a small scale, on a fun scale, um, where the amounts of money are not uh, terribly important. So yeah, I mean, people can, obviously they can just crash and burn, and there are, but on the other hand, the capitalist society allows them to crash and burn too. Uh, they can easily just like blow out their credit, which a lot of people do. They spend far more than they should,
Mm-hmm.
and and that's why I advocate learning the ropes at a young age
Mm-hmm.
by gambling, so that you're not. I mean, it's like the kid who's like gets his first credit card at age 16 or something like that, and just thinks, oh well, I can do anything I want now. I've got credit. That person would never have that attitude if they'd been brought up gambling with their friends.
Mm-hmm. There's also this thing about whether the societal norms are, if it's a norm, a social norm, or whether it's is regulated by law. I think that even though it more or less results in the same, but there is a distinction there, and the actual norms or laws that you have around this, it also creates different outcomes. It's a little bit like saying, if you want to make a comparison, for instance, to my home country of Denmark, it's a very capitalist society, and we are quite free in many ways, but it's also a quite paternalistic society. Like, we have huge taxes to pay for huge welfare schemes.
Right.
And that changes the economic incentive structure for each citizen in the country. For instance, a citizen of Denmark doesn't have to do any due diligence on which bank they choose, because they're all regulated by the government, and all the banks basically offer identical products. The pro is that they don't go bust. You don't have any people all of a sudden exploding on themselves because they chose a bad bank. The downside, however, is that they are not really trained for hardcore capitalist decision making or situations. So, I mean, do you have any opinion there? I mean, I know I'm making a parallel, but we don't necessarily have to make that parallel. It was just to illustrate the concept that there's a trade-off. Either you kind of save the people who kind of needs to be saved, but by doing so, you create an incentive structure that generates even more people who needs to be saved? Or do you kind of just let them fail, which then creates an incentive structure that generates more people who are robust and which will not fail, if you understand what I mean?
Yeah, well, gambling creates the second kind of structure,
Yeah.
which is not as adaptive in Denmark as it is in the United States. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt that people learn to take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And even if in
Yeah.
your country the government is going to make sure that you don't go through the bottom. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's going to be the gambling world. There is charity in the gambling world. There are people, the winners are often charitable toward the losers and help them out and might give them a little job,
Mm-hmm.
or give them some money to go back and try again, that kind of thing. So it is more like raw capitalism, though. It's not so it's might not be as useful in your society as it is in a more pure capitalist form.
Do you have any preferences or judgment calls, like for instance on legislation? How do you think gambling legislation should be? If there should be any.
I think there shouldn't be any restrictions on social gambling. And I think I'm very anti-casino. I think casinos should be abolished, actually.
Why?
Because they're just exploited.
Mm-hmm. They have
That's
the
all
same
they
lighting 24 hours a day. They offer free drinks. They cloud the player's judgment.
But that doesn't matter whether they cloud the player's judgment. Players can't win.
So it's the game.
Every casino game is, unless they play poker maybe or something like that, but every casino game is designed so that the player can't win in the long run. So it's a horrible, not only is it exploitive, but it's psychologically traumatic, because the whole joy of gambling is being right, being proved to be right because you were smart enough to figure something out, or even if you're lucky enough to figure it out, just that you get to win. But in a casino, yes, you'll have some occasional wins, but in the end, you'll be, you'll run out of money because they have the edge.
Is that enough reason for you to say that they should be regulated or made illegal, or what? Because you could say that I mean, it's not like you can just count the outcome on the roulette. Like obviously there are some people who thinks they can beat the roulette, but any somewhat rational human being knows that they're going there and they're taking the short end of the stick, but yet they choose to play just because of the entertainment value.
Well, I think you're minimizing the naivete of people who have been brought up without gambling in their background at all.
Mm-hmm.
When they go into a casino, I had a friend who was a brilliant philosopher. He was 33 or 4 years old at the time, and a PhD, and he went to Vegas for the first time. And he got on a roulette table and he won like 12 times in a row, betting $2. No, I guess it was it was roulette probably, or craps, one or the other. And the guy we went off on to the Grand Canyon, and while we were there, he said, "I've got to get back to Vegas. I've got to get." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Bob, oh, you don't know, you don't understand. This guy was, I mean, it's like had 140 or IQ at least, and he had to get back because he knew that he was going to win. So don't underestimate the naivete of people who've never been exposed.
Yeah.
Hard for us to imagine, especially if they go to a casino and win in the beginning.
Hmm. What
They're
about
gonna
what
they're gonna
about online casinos versus real life casinos? Do you think there's a distinction there, or is it the same thing?
uh, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
What about bookmaking? I mean, the
As
bookmaker
as a,
takes a
as
juice spread, you know. That's how he gets his edge. But at least the player gets to make his own decisions. And if he has more knowledge to beat the bookmaker and the spread, then he could actually win in that game. What do you think
Yeah,
about?
that's. I mean, yeah, that's a good distinction. I mean, the casino games are mechanical, and
Mhm.
there, except for blackjack, there is no decision making that the player can do to affect the outcome at all.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think sports betting is great, and it's probably the era where, yeah, I mean, you have to be really, really, really good to beat the
Yeah.
bookies now.
Yeah, especially nowadays.
They use a lot of computer
Yeah.
technology and a lot of data, big data, and everything else.
Yes.
But I mean, if you bet with your friends and you just uh, uh, none of you are pros, it's a lot of fun, and somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose.
Yeah.
And
But there's a distinction where you actually have an active choice which bets you make. You might have subject matter expertise on one soccer league or something like this, what horse is in a good shape. There's some
yeah,
actual skill involved, even though you're usually taking the short end of the stick.
and by the way, that when you were mentioning prediction markets recently, they're great, but I think that they're a very recent development. And I believe in the U.S. you're still barred from betting on the election. I
Yeah,
think
probably.
that
At least online.
yeah, yeah. I mean, but the election was a great opportunity for all kinds of crazy bets.
Well, actually, I think betting markets have been around for a very long time. I remember learning about an economical concept called the uh, what's it called? The intelligent. No, what? Okay, I forgot the actual name. It has a name, but it's something about the intelligence of the mass or something like this. And it was proven by an economist in the 1910s or something like this at a big
Wisdom of crowds.
Yes, wisdom of crowds. That's the name. Okay, you're aware. For the viewers who aren't aware, it's when you have a betting market and where experts are allowed to make bets on whatever. In this case, when it was proven, I believe it was they were betting how much a bull weight uh, the weight of a bull or something like this, or a cow, at some farmers convention, and they had like thousands of farmers putting a coin in, making a bet, and obviously the bets were all over the place. But if you took the average of all
Yeah,
the bets,
yeah,
you
yeah,
got the right
yeah.
guess. It's the best estimator of a guess. Um,
Definitely, but I meant betting markets like Betfair. I mean, those are only like last 20 years or 15 years, something like that.
So Betfair is an online bookmaker, I believe. Yeah, they were quite early actually. The characteristic with Betfair as a bookmaker is that you can play as the bookmaker. You can lay odds,
Yeah,
not only
yeah,
bet on odds. And
yeah,
then there's a basically supply and demand again.
yeah.
And of course, because of arbitrage online, the Betfair markets follow all the other bookmaking markets. So you can't in the very old days. I believe like this was an old Morty Holmes trick that he was quick at figuring out how to make arbitrage among bookmakers. But I don't think that's not really possible anymore. Too much information.
And there's actually within the scientific community, there's also interest in betting,
Mm-hmm.
betting about which technology will come out ahead in the end, or I forget which scientific propositions uh,
There
they were
is.
mentioned, but
That's one of the dangers about it's a policy failure. So just like you have market failures in a capitalist society, you also have policy failures, and that's a policy failure. That when you don't have a free market of deciding which technology to choose. For instance, when government steps in and says, no, we want to choose wind energy, then you distort the market and you get a kind of a fake amount of investment allocated to that sector, which maybe it should have gone to another energy source like solar energy or nuclear energy or something like this. So this is a policy failure that's a little bit scary, and this applies to any industry. The moment you deviate from the free market, I mean, of course, there might be good reasons to do it, and you also have some advantages.
well, the free market doesn't isn't concerned with the environment, however.
That's a market failure. They produce an externality, so that's a cost on third parties. And actually, in a true capitalist spirit, that's not allowed. So that's a market failure and an externality, and it should be compensated. Because then it's not capitalism. If agent A and agent B are trading, but it hurts agent C, he must be compensated, and that's kind of what's going on. But yeah, that's a classic example of a market
But if
failure.
you destroy the environment, you cannot compensate anyone.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not saying that there are not good reasons to make regulations. It was just this thing about when you have a free market where people are allowed to make bets on technologies, for instance, you get the wisdom of the crowds, and the allocation of capital is as efficiently allocated as the information set allowed it to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It might be wrong, but that was the collective information set at the moment. It was the best guess we had, so to say. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have any regulation on climate policy. I think you should, but I am saying that it's a political area where there's a huge amount of potential of policy failure, and there probably has been already a ton of policy failure.
Horrible policy.
And probably if you just had no policy at all, I would probably bet that the free market would give us better chances of solving the climate crisis faster than government. But that's just my opinion. Someone could take the bet.
Yeah, well, there might be some murders involved too. I mean, that is, if you destroy the environment in somebody's area and you don't compensate them, there'll be consequences.
I mean, it shouldn't. You're not allowed to, in my opinion. If you pollute, then you should compensate the people that you pollute, and you shouldn't. It's not allowed to pollute. There should be laws against polluting, or at least pay a very high.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any more arguments on the con side of gambling?
Well, I'm probably not the right person to find them. I mean, I know that you can also argue that it's not noble or dignified to want to beat other people, to want to win against other people.
I actually get that a lot. I don't really want to play backgammon for money against my friends.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I believe that you should have gambling friends who are special type of friends.
Yeah. But if they have good character, then they usually end up becoming your true friends, and then
right. Well, then you can exclude them from your gambling set. but I believe that gambling friends are a special breed, and a lot of them are stubborn, ignorant, nasty, stupid, but they're very entertaining, and they're um, uh, they they reap you. It's rewarding to deal with them. Let's put
Hmm.
it that way.
The world would be
So
boring without without gambling, right? It, it's like it kind of has to. It has a place in the world. Probably like alcohol and drugs as well. Even though I'm not a user of neither, but I do recognize that there's a place in the world for it. You know, it does. It's kind of like your basic proposition that the positives have been ignored because of the historical reasons that you explained.
yeah,
You could probably make the same case of marijuana, for instance, or even harder drugs, maybe.
yeah. I mean, and all those. I mean, and sex.
Yeah.
I mean, sex was another of the Puritans, no-nos.
Mm-hmm.
Sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? I
Uh-huh.
mean, music too. I mean, they didn't think music was very very good because what's the purpose? What does it do? It just like so
Yeah.
you get a little transient pleasure.
Uh-huh.
Does that make the wheat grow faster? Does that make your house better able to withstand the rain? No, uh, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think like um, because of gambling specific, the way it involves opinions and the testing of opinions, it actually has more of an isomorphism to socially beneficial activities. It to markets and things like that, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's actually a better candidate than these other pleasures for actually like having value beyond the pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. But I'm just saying that the you have to. I'm acknowledging that some of these areas, even though there is no value like there is in gambling, it still has value. And I think that in a free society, you should be free to choose to indulge yourself in these things. And it's better be to train your character to control it rather than to just because it's also a psychoanalytical thing. Like if you suppress these deep human desires, it actually just jumps up tenfold. It's not you don't have you have to control the beast within, right? Um, it's this thing like when you define these what did you call them,
Puritanical.
puritanical movements of the early settlers, which I guess was for the most part Christians, right? Were they a specific type of Christians or
Protestant.
Protestants? Okay, so
Yeah.
like my ancestors in the north of Europe. Um, so it's a very conservative worldview, right? That you don't want to indulge yourself in any kind of. I guess I mean from a game theoretical viewpoint, it kind of makes sense because back then life had a lot more risk than it has nowadays because we're so wealthy now, especially if you're from the north of Europe like Scandinavia. There is actually no risk. Like you could not work, you could stop working, and you would still get food. You would still have a place to live. But back
Yeah.
then, that life had so much risk, so the smallest mistake were fatal. So
Yeah.
right,
And I describe it as a warfare mentality. You're at war,
mm,
and when you're at war, you can't fuck off. You
yeah,
can't you can't like go to sleep while you're guarding the fort.
yeah,
Um, and the Protestants imagined that the enemy was Satan, and he was constantly working. He never rested. He
Wow.
was always
Yeah.
trying to tempt you, always trying to get you to
Mhm.
relax,
Mhm.
always trying to get you to indulge in some pleasure where your guard would be down.
Yes.
And then, then he would have his way.
This might be the reason that the north and west of Europe and exported to the North American continent, that maybe we just outcompeted everybody in the world with this attitude. We're so hardworking.
You will. Yeah, you will. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah,
But
yeah.
obviously it's progress. I mean, I would prefer to live today than I living 300 years ago like this. Um, and there's kind of this tension between the conservative, the tyranny of the conservative, but there's also danger about the chaos of the progressive. And I mean, I think that the people arguing the other side of this debate of gambling, for instance, they have so much focus on the chaos of just letting go and letting our desires run free. They don't understand that the real value is in the balance. The real value is that you have character. If you don't have character, if you are just out in one extreme, because you're not testing your character, you're just relying on a very tyrannical regime, basically. You have character if you manage to
Yeah,
balance the,
yeah.
the, the chaos and the rigid tyranny. At least that's my, and I
The
think
Catholic Church has a
yeah.
the Catholic Church has a more relaxed attitude toward gambling.
Okay, what's their attitude?
Their attitude is that as long as it doesn't hurt anybody, it's all right.
Hmm. But they also have a more relaxed attitude towards sinning, right? You can
Yeah,
basically just pray your way out of it or pay
yeah,
your.
yeah, exactly.
So they're more
Yeah,
casual in all ways.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a difference between Catholic countries and Protestant countries too.
Hmm. What
And it's
about? Okay, yeah. Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just thinking about now we've talking a lot about the Western mentality, which is essentially where you come from, where I come from,
Yeah,
north of Europe, U.S. centric.
yeah, yeah,
And we just now we're talking about a little bit about the Catholic, which is more the south of Europe, more Latin
yeah,
American. What
yeah.
about like in the Muslim world, the Middle East, for instance, which is like the backgammon mecca? Everyone plays backgammon there, and they are maybe the most gambling happy people I know of. But their religion is very conservative. They're not allowed to gamble in their religion.
No, they're very puritanical.
Yeah.
But why do you say they're gambling happy?
I don't know, they just are. Maybe it's because they're suppressing it in one side of their personality, and then
You mean in Muslim countries, you think they're gambling happy?
maybe it depends on the country. But in some of the countries, definitely.
Like Turkey?
I would say Turkey likes gambling, but
But
that's
it's
just maybe I'm having the wrong perception. But that's in sports and online casinos and
Mhm.
backgammon, Play 65. Imagine remember how many players from Play 65 10,
Uh-huh.
15 years ago from Turkey? There was a lot.
Yeah.
But of course, Turkey is also, I mean, it's a very big country. You have very conservative Muslims, you have very progressive liberals, more Western
Yeah,
types.
I don't think Saudi Arabia you'd get a lot of gamblers, but I mean, who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows? I mean, repressive regimes do, create people who have strong passions too.
Yeah. That's in the psychoanalysis.
And Asia is very interesting too. Their
Hmm.
attitudes.
Yes. Oh,
The,
yeah. Maybe they are the most gambling happy,
they
probably.
are,
Yeah.
they are,
Yes.
and they're also like I've never seen an Asian who's a bad loser. They don't
Interesting.
they don't they don't have that there. They're very like warlike when they gamble. They just take losing as it's nothing sort of.
Why do you think that is?
Um, it's probably a deep cultural belief that life is they probably believe life is more random than we do.
Mm.
It's not that as easy to control.
Could it be something with their religion? Like there's a lot of Buddhists in Asia, and they have this egoless religion where you kind of detach your emotions from the world more zen, or could it be that they're just exposed to it to a larger extent, so they basically learn how to be not be bad losers?
I don't know at all. I don't think that religion enters into their. I don't know that religion uh, controls gambling at all in their cultures.
Yeah.
I guess it does because in China, the Chinese gamblers have to go to Macau.
Yes, I think it's illegal in the mainland.
Yeah, but
And the Turks,
yeah,
they have to go to Cyprus, where they allow.
that's right. That's
So
right.
it's kind of like the governments know that there has to be somewhere where people can let go of the steam.
Well, the U.S. used to have Cuba
Uh huh.
until Fidel Castro spoiled the party.
Yeah.
But Cuba used to be this incredible hotbed of gambling and sex and every other thing that you could, drugs and every other thing you could ever want. And it's right off the coast of the U.S., just like Cyprus is right off the coast of Turkey, and just like Macau is right off the
Hmm.
coast of China, an island,
Yes.
with, yeah.
So even in these conservative regimes, they still find an outlet for it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Which goes to show probably goes to say that there's something about human nature that you can't really oppress these things.
But there's one term that we haven't mentioned that I think is worth mentioning, which is advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I recommend is that people be advantage players, and you know what that is because you are one. But it's something that's actually foreign to ordinary people. They don't even understand, most of them, that if you're a bit more clever than the people you gamble with, you can win. They just think you lose, but it's so much fun anyway that it's okay. And that's why they go to casinos. But the whole idea of an advantage player as someone who's finding positive equity situations and thereby getting the real joy of gambling,
Mm-hmm.
which is winning, is really pretty foreign to the common perception in every country.
Yeah. Is this one of the personal reasons that you like that you've been a professional gambler basically your entire adult life? Because that's your career, right? You got your PhD and then you basically just said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna go play backgammon," and then you made a career out of it.
Well, what
For
actually happened, the story that I tell in my book is that I was as an undergraduate, I was a chemistry major, and I found philosophy when I was in my senior year, and it was very easy compared to what I've been doing. But when I wrote my thesis, there was a guy in the philosophy department at the University of Toronto, where I was going to school, who was the superstar of the department. He was a brilliant philosopher. He's still very well known, but he had some what I thought were peculiar ideas about the philosophy of science. Basically, he was an anti-realist, meaning that basically believed that the things that science tells us might work, but there's no reality to them necessarily. So, I mean, to me, yeah, that's true, but it's true that there's no necessary reality to you and me either. You could be a hologram. What do I know? All I know is that it works, that you're not a hologram. That's the simplest theory. And that's the way science works. So anyway, I asked him, could I question your published works in my thesis. And he said, yeah, sure, I'll be your thesis supervisor. And so I did it. I refuted him, or I thought I did, but he didn't care.
Yeah, because he was the one to grade your paper, right?
Yeah, well, he was one of the.
Or
It's a
one of
it's a
them.
whole it's a whole colloquy of people. It's
Okay.
8 people,
Okay. Okay.
but he didn't care, and that really annoyed me. And I realized that, like, hey, and I learned to play backgammon, and I said, like, wow, I get rewarded right away
Hmm.
when I'm right. It's not like this might take years and years, like where I'd have to publish and publish and publish, and maybe finally somebody would say, oh yeah, you were right. But he wouldn't say I was right. He just said, oh, go ahead, and now you can go ahead.
Yes.
So
It feels
yeah,
unfair. It's almost like if you have a field like this where a bet cannot determine who's right, then it's almost not even a science, right? It's almost like in that area where sometimes it's just called a social science, but in reality, a social science still like economics. It has the feature like we could make a bet, whether whatever.
well, that's another thing that gambling teaches you is that it teaches you uh, to create propositions
Hmm.
that can be determined
Yes,
by
that's
evidence.
that's the scientific method,
Yeah,
basically.
which means that you can't um, make bets on a lot of the things that people argue about on the internet every day, because no evidence would invalidate the things they say.
Yeah.
You can never be proved right or wrong. But it does teach you to distinguish between uh, those propositions that are testable and those that
Hmm.
aren't.
Hmm.
One of the goals of the logical positivists, the philosophical movement of the early 20th century, who were trying to create philosophy in the image of science, so that they would say, well, somebody says God exists, there is no evidence that could ever disprove or prove it, or certainly none that could disprove it. So it's a meaningless, statement. It does teach you to make that distinction,
Hmm.
and it's an important one,
Hmm.
because arguing about something where there's no possible proof is the most futile, you
Yes.
know, endeavor you could ever engage in.
Yeah. That's funny that you have like a major event like this that kind of set the motivation for your whole gambling career, and probably also like it gave you a motivation to pursue the right path, which is to find the truth, find what
Yep.
works. Would you say now that you think back, I don't know if he's still alive, your old professor.
Oh, he is. Yeah, he's
It
very successful. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But how's your feeling towards him? Because it's like if he has a proposition that basically cannot be proven or nor disproven, can it even be considered a hypothesis then? What's your
Oh, I mean, he just didn't bother to argue against me. He
okay?
probably could have put me in my place.
Okay, okay, okay. So it's more like
He,
that.
but he was just being generous.
Okay, okay,
He's like, okay, yeah, yeah, nice, nice, good
okay, okay,
work.
okay, okay.
Go ahead. So
Okay.
I don't, I sort of, I don't have any bad feelings about that, really. But it just like motivated me to want to do things where I could get a more immediate reward, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Because I went to some philosophical conferences with him too, and it seemed like nobody really cared about anything, about the truth of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, can I get to speak at this conference, and
Yeah.
will you publish me in your journal, and
Yes.
that kind of thing.
It really ties back to some of the things we talked about. Like it's not really a fair system if you can't make bets to settle whose opinion is
Yeah.
should carry more weight.
Yep.
Like your word is just as good as mine. Um, okay, Bob. I hope that this is not a final discussion, not just between you and me, but I hope this kind of opens up your perspective to at least the backgammon community, which has some following here, and maybe can get a little bit of interest from maybe some other niches, like maybe some other game niche, communities are gonna see this and get a little bit inspired. And at least I'm open to any kind of dialogue. If someone has some opinions or arguments that we didn't cover, please put them in the comment section here. I will try to interact with you guys. And I'm sure, Bob, you would appreciate any kind of discourse.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Is it something, because I think you told me some time ago that you were working on a book on this topic, or maybe
Yeah.
I
This
heard
is
it.
the book.
Okay, how far are you in this process?
Uh, Very far, but I haven't. I wrote a draft some years ago that had some deficiencies, but I think I'm a little more, you know, more organized now. It's really a matter of exposition. It's like how to present it,
Yeah.
especially how to present it to the world,
Mm-hmm.
not the gambling world,
Mm-hmm.
like you and me, but to people to whom gambling is something pretty foreign.
Yes.
It's pretty naughty.
Yes.
And the idea of an advantage player and that kind of thing, it doesn't compute at all in that world.
Yeah.
So the idea that you could, so yeah, that's the challenge
Mm-hmm.
is really how to present it.
Yeah, I hope that this becomes a bestseller and we get your word out there. I think, and I thoroughly agree about your perspectives, and I think it would make society a better place if more people at least heard the other side, like heard the upside and the discipline it takes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Okay, so we
Thank
are.
you, Mark.
Oh, you're welcome, Bob. It's my pleasure. I think we are on the same team here. So let this be an initial what do you call it, like a starting point from this discourse, and hopefully we can make some rings in the water and reach some people who hasn't been exposed to these ideas.
Make waves.
Make waves. Okay, so at the end here, let's talk a little bit about backgammon, because this is a backgammon podcast. So,
Yeah.
and since you're my first guest in the Backgammon Galaxy podcast, could you tell us a little bit about, especially to the viewers who don't know you? Of course, you're well known in the community, in the tournament circuit, not circus, but we have a lot of viewers from all kinds of nations, Latin America, Asia. Could you tell us a little bit about your career as a backgammon player, and what is backgammon to you?
I'm actually like I've had a lot of opportunities early on to be a real make lots of money. I never really made lots of money because I always was happy to play at the club where I used to frequent in Los Angeles. So, but what happened? It's a long story. It would be a long story to tell you how I ended up there. But some of my friends went on to really go out and hustle the bigger fish, which I never really did too much of. So I mostly stuck around and played. There's a club in LA. There were a succession of clubs, and there were like lots of Persians there, and eventually the club became a Persian club. So I had some good results.
Was it money game mostly?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you feel like you've transitioned into being more of a tournament player now, or do you still consider yourself a money game player, or is it the same thing?
I'm still pretty bad at tournament play. I've never been that good at it.
Okay.
but I'm getting better. I'm getting better. There there's lots of opportunity to play online now. But
What do you think about the change that backgammon has been through, especially the last decade or so, where it's become very sports minded and people compete for PRs, error rates, and so on, rather than going out and playing money games all night?
yeah, I talked about that a lot in my book, actually. But about and a lot of what I do in the book is reminisce about the great money making opportunities there were. But one of the things that I discuss is my regret that there's no proposition play anymore. That used to be the most enjoyable form of play that you could imagine.
Because now we just look it up with the extreme gammon and get the result
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah. But what would happen is there'd be, you'd be playing some people and there'd be people watching. Somebody would make a take and everybody would go, "That's ridiculous. How could you do that?"
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, all right. You want to play a prop? We'll let's play." And the propositions could go on for days and even a week or two because nobody did know the answer. And in the end, the right side would always win. It was like a wonderful kind of justice that was you were able to create.
But now you can make bets on simply who guesses what the extreme gammon says.
Right.
You don't have to go through the 4-day hand rollout of finding a winner.
Yeah. But the proposition, when you had the right side of it, could lead to really huge gains.
Yeah.
You'd have a huge advantage. I tell the story in my book of a bookmaker who visited Los Angeles in 1980 or 81. And we got to a bear-off. I was playing him for $50 a point, which was enormous stake at that time. And we got to a bear-off where he had 2 checkers on the 5-point, and I had one on the 6 and one on the 3. And he redoubled me, and I took. And he said, "You take that? You want to play right now? You want to play $100 against $300 right now?" And he scared the hell out of me, but I knew I had the right side of it. So we started playing it, and within a few minutes he was 13 points ahead. He'd won like 13 games in a row or something like that.
What was the position, Bob? Give me the position. I just took out XG for the viewers. I can set up the position.
I just want to make sure, but I think it's 2 on the 5-point against 1 on the 6 and 1 on the 3.
2 on the 5-point against 1 on the 6 and 1 on the 3. Okay. And the white is on roll?
The 2 on the 5 is on roll.
So this guy, and it was a redouble.
Yeah.
So this guy was redoubling. Yeah, and we can see here it's a huge take. You have 28.7% winning chances in this position.
Yeah.
So what a great proposition you were in.
But not only that, but he said, "Let's play it 100 against 300. He didn't say, "I'll pay you a point." So I can actually, whenever he misses, I can redouble even though I'm an underdog because I'm getting 3-1 on the money.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time.
No.
But it was like, but anyway, after a few games, the guy was way ahead. I hadn't even won a single game, and he's with his girlfriend, and he says, "This is sort of a dull little thing. Where do you want to eat?" And I'm like, "No, don't quit. So he said, "All right, I'll play a few more games," and then he started to lose. And of course, then he just kept playing until.
Wow, you got him there. The moment he
Yeah,
started losing, then he wouldn't give up.
yeah. But the amazing thing was that in those days, he was a bookie, an honorable bookie, and he sent me money from Australia because he
Okay.
didn't have enough cash with him to
Okay.
pay.
Yeah. He sticked with, or he kept the honor of a gambler.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is a great thing.
Okay, Bob. I have a little test for you here. I have a little position I want to show you, and I want to hear your thoughts about it. Let me just see if I can send you a screenshot. I'm gonna try to send you a screenshot here in the um, in the Zoom chat. Can I do that? Oh, it doesn't. Okay, I'll send you on Facebook. I'll send you a screenshot here on Facebook because the viewers now can see the board. And now I'm gonna send the position to you. So this is a money game position.
Yeah, okay.
You are white, blue is on roll, and blue is doubling to 2. So it's a take pass decision for white. What do you think about this position?
Yeah, I don't pass these games.
So
But
in,
is it really a take? I might pass. I actually don't know.
so what's your thought process here?
My thought process is that I'm buried in the race, but he doesn't really have much of a blitz. Doesn't have that many checkers in the zone to finish me off. So I'll probably get an anchor. I don't know. I think it's technically I think it's a pass.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it blues ahead too much, and there are too many sequences where white gets wiped out.
Would you make any adjustments here? It's a money game situation, so depending on your opponent, could you take that somehow if you felt like he was a weak player, or would you be more inclined to pass if he was a weak player? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I would probably take against a weak player,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times they'll misplay it. It's there's not going to be too much issue for me misplaying it for a few rolls anyway.
Okay, so you think technically you're on the pass side,
Yeah,
but you might take it against a weak player. Okay,
yeah.
so I'm gonna send you now a screenshot of the result. I'm gonna show it to the viewers here, and then I'm gonna send it to you. And I even rolled it out. So here you go. Here you go. Oh, I can actually see that the rollout swapped the result. So it was a very close decision. I really like your analysis here, Bob. I think it was spot on. You were like, is it a take? Is it a pass? And it turns out it was very, very close. And according to the rollout, it's a borderline take. According to XG++, it was half a blunder to take. It thought it was a pass. But on
Really?
rollout, it switched. So it was a close decision, and I feel like your gut feeling and your breakdown of the position was spot on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you gave me, yeah, that was nice. That was very generous. You gave me a position that I couldn't get the wrong answer on.
No, but you could get a wrong opinion if you're like, oh no, this is a huge pass, easy pass, easy pass. Then you would be off, right?
Yeah. Thanks. That was nice of you.
Okay, Bob, let's round it off here. Thank you so much for coming on, having this discussion. I hope that the viewers will enjoy it. Do you have anything more you want to say, Bob, before we finish this?
No, not at all. But thank you for giving me the forum to express my. But if there are any viewers who are own publishing companies or are publishers themselves, um, I'd like them to contact me, because one of the issues with writing this kind of book is that if it's self-published, it might never reach the audience that it deserves to reach.
Yeah, cool. I hope so too. Let's hope that a big publisher will see this podcast and get motivated to get your book out there. Thank you very much, Bob. And for all the viewers, stay tuned. We're going to be back hopefully next week. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Put a comment in there if you like this video. Remember to interact as much as you want. This is a very philosophical topic we've been talking about today, so for sure you have opinions. Put them in the comment sections. I will do my best to respond. And that's all for now. Thank you, Bob. Take care.
Thank you, Mark.